I have here today my 1995 Chevrolet Caprice 9C1. 9C1 being the General Motors Rpo code for a police package vehicle. Some of you may know this as the lesser known sister of and the vehicle that is mechanically identical to the Impala SS. And it certainly does give you Impala performance, sometimes for a cheaper price. Although I have noticed, if I look on Craigslist, these are almost getting rarer than Impalas now, even though they're, for some reason, less desirable. Today I'm going to show you around the exterior, the interior, and the drivetrain of this classic American land yacht. So let's get started. The very first thing I would like to address with this vehicle is just its sheer size. From bumper to bumper, it is almost 18.5 feet long, and the vehicle weighs close to 4,000 pounds. I believe the GVRW this is actually 4,009 pounds. Interestingly enough, an Impala SS is actually heavier than this because of its leather interior and power options that the 9C1 did not come standard with, and this specific vehicle is not equipped with. So actually, Caprice 9C1s in general are lighter, which is why I've heard drag racers prefer them. Anyway, we just start off by looking at the shape. These are what are known as the bathtub Caprices, killer whales, whatever you'd like to call them. I'm not exactly certain what the designers were thinking, however, I can't help but notice a similarity between this Caprice and some of the early 60s Chevy Bel Air bubble tops. You have to wonder if the designers were thinking of those when they drew this up, because even the grille is somewhat reminiscent of an early 60s full-size Chevy. I mean, yes, this type of egg crate grille was standard fare in the 80s and 90s. However, it's just something I choose to think. You can see right up front here, we have a hood ornament that is, I believe as required by law, spring-loaded, so it won't kill a pedestrian. Just in case you happen to hit a pedestrian, I hope you don't. These wheels, the 9C1 did come with drilled steel wheels. You can see the holes in them there. The center caps were a factory addition. The trim rings were not. I added those at a later time from an aftermarket supply. One cool thing 9C1s did have was a single, or often a dual, this one is not equipped, spotlight. And the best thing is, these are the old style Unity spotlights. Not to bash the newer police cars or the Crown Victoria Police Interceptor, which I also love, but I do like these Unity spotlights for just their classic look and rugged construction. Notice you get a metal housing. It's also the domed one, as opposed to the newer ones that are flat up top here. But also, you get the old style handle, which I do like. The doors. If you are used to a new car, the doors on this thing are heavy. I'm not certain how much they weigh, but they do weigh quite a bit. You'll also notice that they just stuck a keyhole in the door. Didn't do much to disguise it. I've seen some cars that put the keyhole right next to the handle. Of course, that requires them to have the pull style handles as opposed to handles like this. And yes, these are chrome plated. I think these might be metal actually. You could definitely feel the quality in this vehicle though. Rear wheels, same thing. I believe the standard tire size was 225/70 R15. This specific vehicle is equipped with two 35-70 R15s in the rear and two 25-75 R15s in the front. Actually, I believe the standard tire size might be 225/75. There are multiple tire options listed in the door jamb. I keep having people asking if this is my gas cap. No, it is not. This is actually a rubber stopper for an old antenna. This was, as we will get into later, an Illinois State Trooper car, and the Illinois State Police cars did have a whip antenna on the rear. Rather, the gas cap is placed in a really interesting spot, which was actually standard fare on a lot of older full-size cars. Can you guess where it is? Normally they're smoother than this. I wonder if my bumper is warped. But behind the license plate. I've gotten many looks at gas stations when I pull up way too far and they're like, what's going on? And then they suddenly see me opening up my license plate. It is what it is. And it's actually, when you're driving around, you know, on roads and lots and that full of modern cars, like, take for example, this Toyota Highlander, that just puts a gas door on the car. It is a really interesting novelty to have, and I do enjoy it. You'll notice that unlike the Impala SS, this vehicle carries all the standard chrome that was on a Caprice. It did not go for the monotone blackout that they chose for the Impala. Also, something interesting, although it was not listed in my Rpo codes, this car does appear to have an Emblem Delete. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I do like the clean look, however, I also like having my emblems. It is not known whether that was a factory or a dealer Emblem Delete. It's possible that, you know, the trunk might have been repaired at one time and they just took the emblems off, or even a previous owner could have deleted the emblems. I am not sure. However, I'm not going to complain. Coming off to this side, you'll see, as usual, the same thing. Interesting note, this body line, a lot of people don't notice that. It goes all the way from back to front. And you could see it just straight like an arrow. This car just looks like it wants to go fast. Yes, I've noticed the car is raked. No, I do not have an explanation for that. None of the other ones I've seen are raked, so I am unsure why my car is raked. Again, I'm not going to complain. One thing the police package does get you to is a solid antenna. It's a good thing and a bad thing. It's nice and durable, but at the same time it's also a slight pain when you street park it like I do and you occasionally whack it on trees. Windshield wipers, just interesting to note, they do sit below the line for the windshield. If you turn the wipers on, they will actually pop up a few inches to their resting place. So that is very interesting. I love that a lot more than standard windshield wipers. For some reason, it's just so satisfying. I don't know why. Anyway, I believe, although I might touch on more things later, especially if we get into police package specific stuff, I believe that will do it for the exterior of the vehicle. Now let's move into the interior. The first thing I want to show, which I would consider the interior, is the trunk. This is the next thing I'm going to do, and probably the last thing for today, because the sun is going down. To get into the trunk, you're going to need your key. Now, those of you who, grew up during the era these cars were around may know where the hidden key slot is. Cadillac Fleetwoods also had this. Simply flip up the emblem, turn the key, and there's your interior. Notice you get a full-size spare tire. Very good. Comes in handy. The specific tires I have on this are Cooper Cobra Radial GTs, just in case anyone was wondering. And you'll notice you get pretty ample space in here for whatever you need. Luggage for a road trip, displays for a car show, spare interior parts, whatever. I will try to provide information on the cubic foot capacity of the trunk. Just know that it's really huge. If I had a Crown Victoria to compare, I would point out that the Crown Victoria does have a deeper trunk than the Caprice. However, it also has more of a shelf over the wheel arch, which the Caprice does not. The Caprice, I noticed, does have a longer trunk. Like, it goes from back there all the way up here, whereas the Crown Victoria has a not as long trunk. I'm unsure how to word that. So just an interesting side-by-side comparison I want to make note of. Anyway, let's move on to the passenger cabin. So now we're here on the interior of the vehicle. We do have to wait for it to get a little bit darker before I can show you a special feature that some 9C1s came with. However, I can show you some of the basic things in the interior. First off, as with any full-size American sedan from this era, it is very comfortable and it is roomy. I am 6'2", and I am seating in a good position, very comfortably. And the seats are soft, yet provide support. Don't let the towels fool you. They were actually put on by the previous owner to protect the interior. Not sure if you could see it here. If not, I will show you, but the seats are in near mint condition. Not bad for a car that, at the time of filming, was 24 years old. Which 9C1 feature did I wish to highlight? The ticket writer light. When have you ever seen a map light that is capable of illuminating the interior as if it were the daytime? It's a very handy feature, if I do say so myself. We're just going to show you what you get with a vehicle like this. First thing you may notice, front and center is the radio. 6 presets and a cassette player. I mean, pretty typical for 1995, and a really nice radio for an old police car, if I do say so myself. You may even notice it has an equalizer down there, which is pretty fancy. Sometimes you don't even get that with modern radios. So that's really nice. A complaint I always hear about with the radios is they're like insufficient. They don't go loud enough. I don't think that's true at all. I think they're fine. Next up, climate control switches. How do I describe these? They're a little odd because, you know, ooh, listen to that. I don't think they're vacuum operated, but they sure sound like it. Anyway, I guess you just get your basics there. There's nothing really special about this system. So, there's that. Notice your English and metric and your little button to reset the trip odometer is down here. not on your gauge cluster. So that's just kind of an interesting little thing to take note of. Glove box is a little small, but that's just kind of a thing with cars from this era. Your glove box is kind of small. It's not really a complaint because it's not really something unique to this car. So there's that. Get your fake wood on the doors. Look at that. These are really nice quality handles right here, if I do say so myself. On the driver's side, you can control all 4 windows from there. So that's pretty nice. That is a little manual mirror adjuster. When's the last time you've seen one of those? Headlight controls and a very glaring trunk switch. Only works when the car is running. I'm not sure if that was a police package thing that they put that there. Cadillac Fleetwoods had it inside the glove box, which, I mean, I'm not going to complain about it, that it's there. You know, it's convenient, and it might have been a police package thing. I can't exactly say for sure. Anyway, we'll get to the gauge cluster in just a second. One thing you may notice is this car just has 2 bucket seats. Does not have a bench seat, and it does not have a console. I mean, it was a 9C1. Some of them did have consoles. It depends on what department you bought it from and how they were outfitted. I personally like it without the console because I can lay stuff here. I have extra, you know, little storage. As much as that sounds like, wait, you have extra storage without a console? I do. Also, it makes the interior of the car feel wider, if you know what I mean. You feel like you get a little bit more space. Hard to describe. While I'm here, I might as well point out, look at these high quality seat belts. Made by General Safety. This is all sheet metal right here. Very high quality, unlike some of the plastic ones. They start to wear out on you. These are still almost like new 24 years later. This is one of the high quality parts you get with a car like this. Anyway, moving on to the gauge cluster, you can see very satisfying just how symmetrical it is. I really like that. And you get a voltmeter and an oil pressure gauge. Even in a lot of modern cars, that's not something you see very often. I'm one of those people that likes to be informed about what's going on with my car, what's going on with my engine and such, so I like having those. On a side note, the 9C1 oil pressure gauges are different than the civilian ones. The 9C1 oil pressure gauges show you your true oil pressure, whereas a civilian one will only show you if it's above like 5 psi, it shows it as 40. So I will caution you there. If you're going to replace the unit in a civilian model, I'd recommend going with a 9C1 oil pressure sender. Just want to say that. Column shifter, and check out this steering column, and check out this ignition switch. You ever go to a car show and see some GM cars from the 60s and 70s? They have this exact same column and this exact same ignition switch. It's kind of funny. I say this car is built with quality, but then you see stuff like that. I mean, at least it's a good part that they're reusing, I suppose. It's not, you know, a plastic pile of junk. So I'm not really going to bash it. Tachometer is actually aftermarket. I figured you would know, but I just want to point that out. Let's start this puppy up. Let's see what we get. Yeah, listen to that rumble. So you have a digital speedometer, very 90s. 219,074 miles. And notice I did not have to put my foot on the brake to start it. Old cars, they just lack that safety thing. Now, some of you might be wondering, What is this switch for right here? This is a special feature that some 9C1s came with. Watch this. How about that? How about that? Isn't that amazing? I guess it was meant so, you know, you could leave the car idling and still have it secure. You know, you didn't want someone to just jump in and take it. Also, this lever down here, you could actually lock it and you could adjust your idle. Again, if you're running police lights and such, you're stopped maybe on a traffic stop, you could put it to a higher idle, you know, to get more power out of your alternator. So that's just something. One more on the floor. You do get an ashtray, little storage place. This is also a cup holder, I guess. It just wasn't built for the McDonald's cups of today. Yep. Demonstrate the radio. Again, anybody that says the radio is insufficient, I don't exactly believe them. Shut this puppy off. And I know you couldn't see it when the test lights illuminated on the dashboard, but if I just might bring your attention to the key, what's missing from this key? There's no pass key system. How about that? If you get a 9C1, you will more than likely not get a pass key system. And that's a very good thing, because we all know what happens after about 10-15 years is it might not let you start your car because the system will start to fail. And frankly, these cars are old enough where I don't think anyone is going to jump in and steal it. So I'm not too concerned about that. So interestingly enough, not having the security feature is actually a very good thing that you get with these cars. How's that? In the back, you get a basic bench seat with decent legroom. I'm not going to try to claim it has superior legroom to anything else, but good legroom. This was a highway patrol car, so you did have cloth seats. Again, look at the condition the seats are in. This car is 24 years old. Not to toot my own horn, but backseat passengers will be fairly comfortable. And because I said I would, I must demonstrate the windshield wipers. Column-mounted controls, look at how many options you get for the delay, ranging from really slow to really fast. A lot of modern cars only give you like 3: slow, medium, fast. This one, you can set your delay to be really slow, really fast. Let's put it on the mist setting just once. Nice. And now it's time to go under the hood. For 1994, 95, and 96, you had 2 engine options that you could choose from. The 4.3-liter 265 cubic inch V8, there's a throwback displacement for you, or the 5.7-liter 350 cubic inch V8, which this specific vehicle is equipped with and is the more desirable engine. Now, this isn't the exact same one that was used in the Corvettes, the Firebirds, and the Camaros. The B-body LT1 had cast iron heads, unlike the other cars, which used aluminum heads. Interesting bit of trivia, I've actually been told the cast iron heads flow better than the aluminum heads. So, are they better? Perhaps. Both of them, however, did actually sport D-shaped ports instead of the old style rectangular ports. Another cool bit of trivia is if you get aftermarket heads for a first generation small block, it will more than likely have D-shaped ports. So there's a little bit of LT1 influence that still lives on. You may immediately notice that this one does not have the stock intake. I will include a picture of what the engine would have looked like stock. You know, not too far off. I've heard these K&N intakes add anywhere between 2 and 15 horsepower. I couldn't tell you. And another thing you might immediately notice is the green hoses. What's with these? This was actually a special 9C1 feature. These are reinforced hoses, so-called the million-mile hoses. I can't vouch for how tough they are because, I don't know, radiator hoses are just, for some reason, something that doesn't seem to fail? I don't know. Now, since we're talking about hoses, we do have to bring up the routing. Notice this engine comes with reverse flow cooling, similar to some late 50s Pontiacs. It cools the heads first and then the block. This actually allows this engine to run 10.5:1 compression with iron heads using regular gas. That's actually pretty impressive. Now, another difference that I may point out, since we're just talking about, you know, power now, is that not only is there the difference between the iron and the aluminum heads, but the B bodies were also equipped with a torquier cam. And if you listen to the accidental straight piping my car got, you'll definitely be able to hear it. It does have a pretty lumpy idle. Anyway, the engine, the B bodies, was good for 260 horsepower at 4,800 RPM and 330 foot-pounds of torque at 3,200 RPM. So this is a pretty beefy engine. And a 4,000-pound car like this, the 9C1s and the Impalas, moves them 0 to 60 between 6.5 and 7.1 seconds. I personally like to think they're closer to 6.5. Some people might say, you know, closer to 7 if they're being conservative about it, you know. So it definitely has enough power to satisfy anyone's needs. Gas mileage, supposedly 16 city, 26 highway. Of course, that was measured before they made the more realistic standards, you know, moving with the air conditioning on and everything. So I don't know how much I trust that. Now, let's look at this engine. You have this very handsome fuel injection tower, port fuel injection, so that is very good. What if I were to tell you that this was running a distributor-based ignition? Where is the distributor? Down there. See the spark plug wires? That's called OptiSpark. We're going to discuss that a little bit later. I don't know who thought of that, although it does make for a very handsome engine, if I may just say so. Also, you may notice the water pump is cam driven. It does not have a belt going up to it. So there's another little interesting differentiation between the LT1s and the first gen small blocks. That being said, of course, I don't think anything actually interchanges between an LT1 and a first gen small block other than pistons, connecting rods, etc. Because even the timing chain cover is different because it has to allow for the OptiSpark and the cam-driven water pump. So, unfortunately, that also means LT1 parts have a tendency to be a little more expensive than a first-gen small block or an LS-based engine. It was only made between 1991 and 97, and it includes some special parts. So, unfortunately, you might pay a little bit more for replacement parts. Anyway, some good things to point out. This alternator right here, right up top. So if you ever have to replace it, it's nice and cheap. Also, let's see right here. You do get a 2-barrel throttle body, as opposed to some of the old throttle body injection engines that were just a single barrel. They weren't very powerful. Now, on the engine itself, how to determine if you have an LT1 or an L99, that's the 4.3. Unfortunately, I believe the only way to do that is to take the heads off and measure the bore and stroke. Not very efficient. Now, the car spotters at-a-glance method to determine this is the presence of dual exhaust. LT1s will run dual exhaust, whereas L99s will not. So there's your at-a-glance way to tell. There is another way to tell without taking the engine apart, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Moving on back, we're going to take a look at the transmission now. This vehicle and all the B bodies built after, I want to say 94, were equipped with the 4L60E 4-speed automatic transmission. That is an electronic shift version of the 4L60, and that was the only transmission option. The difference in the 4L60E between Caprice 9C1s and Impalas and the rest of the B body line, and I think this is the case, don't quote me on this, but I think they were tuned for quicker shifting. And you can definitely feel that when you drive the car. 4L60E is a fairly common transmission. I want to say GM made something crazy like 1.3 million of these between 1994 and 2006, something like that. So it's fairly common. One thing I read on Wikipedia is that they never beefed up the 4L60E for use with the LT1, so transmission failures after 100,000 miles were common. Of course, I've known so many of these cars that have, 200,000, even 300,000 miles on them with their original transmission, so I'm not exactly sure how much I believe that. I'm just going to say that. And continuing our move back, we find ourselves now at the differential. Obviously, it's just a solid rear axle. Really nothing special about it. Caprice 9C1s with the LT1 and the Impalas have 308 rear axles. I think standard Caprices had 292 rear axles, something like that. So you do get a slight advantage in terms of axle gearing. If you get one with the 4.3, I think it actually, some of them at least, had 342s, just to try to make up for the lower torque of the 4.3. Positraction was an option. However, this vehicle is not equipped with Positraction. And just an interesting note while we're down here, I don't know if you can see it, but I have disc brakes on the rear. Impalas and 9C1s, thanks to the heavy-duty police package, did have disc brakes on the rear. However, testing by independent testing things has shown that the advantage of the discs versus the drums are like negligible, but you have them. So that's good. Easier to change out, I guess. Now I just really quickly want to touch on the driving experience. Really nice car to drive. The steering isn't light. The power steering is actually heavier. I think the 9C1s and the Impalas actually had heavier steering on them to make them feel more sporty, but I like that. Actually, same thing with the gas and the brake pedal. The gas and brake pedal are really firm. I've never like accidentally spun the tires in this car from giving it too much gas because it's firm. Good visibility all around. Look at how low the windows are. It's like old cars. Stick your arm out the window. I like that feature. One interesting thing I do have to say about driving is, and you'll hear this because during the driving demonstration I will use my turn signal, the turn signals are slow. Like click, 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 click. They're not fast. Of course, I think that's fitting of a big car. Little cars have a fast turn signal, big cars need to have a slow one. Very smoothly, as you'd expect a car this size too. Things I really want to highlight on this vehicle, and actually any GM vehicle, is your SPID label, Service Parts Identification Label. In this car it's found in the trunk, and some other vehicles it might be found in the door jamb. This has all of your RPO codes, that is regular production option codes. Basically it tells you which options your vehicle is equipped with. You can look these up on the internet. Pretty much all of them, since GM started doing this, are available online. You could also find out if anything's been changed on the car. Like, for example, I do not have power seats, according to the SPID label, I think, and also there are no motors under my seats. However, I have a switch for power seats. This tells me that switch has probably been replaced at some time or another with possibly a junkyard part. Now, the three most important labels, the codes on here, I think, are your engine, your axle, and your body code. So, first things first, GU4. That is my rear axle gear code. That shows I have a 308 rear gear. Next up, LT1. That is my engine code. So that's like confirmation you do have an LT1. And finally, your like specialty code, Impala SS's would say WX3, but mine says 9C1. And that is how I know I have an authentic GM police package vehicle. And sometimes you find fun stuff with them too, like identification stickers from the department that used to own it. I actually have these in several places around the vehicle. You might have even noticed under the hood, I had a metal plate that said Illinois State Police. So that's pretty cool. This is just something I really wanted to highlight, not only with this car, but with any General Motors vehicle. So now we get to the portion of the video where we're going to go over some of the negative sides of the car. Although I have to say some of the problems have a tendency to be exaggerated online, in my opinion. First thing I have to point out is, of course, the OptiSpark I don't know who decided to mount the distributor on the bottom front of the engine, but, you know, people joke all the time, don't run over a puddle or you'll wreck your distributor. I personally think the problem is exaggerated. You know, I will admit, from a, you know, cosmetic standpoint, if you've ever seen an LT1, like just on an engine stand, it looks very sleek because there's not like, you know, a distributor sticking up here. It's a small block, it would be in the back, I think, you know, to just interrupt the lines on the fuel injection tower. But anyway, other than that, practicality wise, I don't think it's very good, especially since it's mounted directly underneath the water pump. If you ever have a water pump leak, it's going to destroy your distributor. Again, I don't know who thought of that. On a side note, you may notice it's all oily. LT1s do have a tendency to leak oil. That's something to watch out for. Also, to get a lifter tick on, I believe, cylinder number 3. Mine has it, and a bunch of other ones have it. It just seems to be a common issue, and I'm not sure why. Well, while we're under the hood, maybe I could point out the fact that you can see daylight right there. Like any other vehicle from this era, it is susceptible to rust. I try not to drive it in the winter, however, sometimes it is unavoidable. So you do need to be careful about rust. I've especially seen some of these in junkyards where like the entire fender well is rotted out. So that is something you want to be mindful of, especially if you're ever thinking of buying a car like this, is rust. It happens. Another issue, actually, while we're discussing the body, I will always say these vehicles are built with quality. They're definitely very sturdy. It's just panel gap can sometimes be quite inconsistent. Look at the gap up there versus down there. You can physically see it coming together. In fact, you could even see that that's not even. Again, that could just be caused by corrosion, like maybe the body panels or the frame is sagging. Could be a factory thing. Like, again, don't get me wrong, the car is definitely built sturdy. It's just some areas have a tendency to be lacking, I'll say. The windows too, they use kind of cheap window rollers on the windows. I actually recently had to get this one fixed because the roller cracked. I bought new rollers for, I think, $4.95, and it took an hour to fix. It works fine now. It's just, if you get a GM car from this era, prepare for the window rollers to be cracked. That's just, it could happen. Anyway, also just, if I may point out, the sheer size of the vehicle. Again, once you get used to it, it's not that bad, but if it's the first time you've ever driven a vehicle this large, you might have a not so good time maneuvering it. Not saying that like a crossover SUV that a lot of people nowadays really seem to like is any more or less maneuverable than this. Let's be honest here. It's just the length is something you need to watch out for. Also, if you get a 9C1, know that it will most likely have plugged up antenna holes, meaning those could very well leak. This one right here, I've had to reseal with a tub and tile caulk, I think twice now, and I've actually found water in my trunk both times, this being the culprit. So definitely make sure to watch out for that. And of course on the 9C1 too, random rust holes everywhere where they used to have stuff mounted. and it like rubbed on the paint. This is probably a light bar. Watch out for that. One more thing, just with the body, is all of these cars have a tendency to get a rust hole right there. I think they didn't do anything to reinforce the carpet right there, and it's right where your foot sits. So a lot of them have that hole right there. There's something else to be mindful of. And the keys, just since I'm here, an Impala and a civilian Caprice and all the other B-bodies did have key fobs, as far as I know. However, 9C1s did not. You will receive a metal key like this, and that's it. That's also a good thing though, because GM cars from this era also had 2 keys. One of them worked in the ignition, the other one opened the doors. This has 1 key that does both. So, it's a good and a bad thing. Anyway, I think that's pretty much all my complaints about the car though, which, you know, man, on, you know, just any car, that's actually a relatively short list, if I do say so myself. Anyway, let's get finished up here. So just a final few words on this car I want to say, is that I bought this as my first car. And, you know, I'm in college right now. I think this was the best first car I could have realistically asked for. It's big, it's rear-wheel drive, it was made in the United States of America in Arlington, Texas. It has room for all my friends, and it has enough horsepower to satisfy any young bachelor's desires. That being said, does this make a good first car, like a teenager, college car, maybe a just starting off car? That depends. Are you willing to take care of it properly, I think, is the real question. Are you willing to deal with the substandard gas mileage that it has? You know, you might think this is more of an enthusiast car. Maybe you're probably not going to look for a car this old if you're, you know, not really a gearhead. But who knows? You could inherit it from your grandparents or something. So anybody could end up with one of these cars. I think the best way to say it is, if you're looking for a disposable car, there are plenty of early 2000s Camrys on Craigslist for $500. The prices of clean Caprices, especially 9C1s, are going up every day. If you have one of these cars, if you buy one, if you end up with one, take care of it and enjoy it. It is worthwhile. And I think that's really all I have to say. You know, this is the best car I've driven, and I'll say it again, I'll say it a million times. I think this is the best first car I could have realistically asked for. And I think overall, it's a really great car. Yes, I'm saying that looking back on it, maybe if this were a newer car and you didn't have the like whole retro side of it and everything, I'll admit that maybe I might have been more critical about it. Perhaps. But all in all, I think, especially compared to a lot of cars today, this is just a really great vehicle. And I hope, you know, whether you see one on the road, at a car show, wherever, you can stop for a second and appreciate it.